Good evening, everybody, and welcome to our latest webinar, which is presented by Lisa Preston, the founder of ShoeMed. Lisa is going to discuss how shoe construction and styling can affect the feet, fit. Before I hand you over to Lisa, I would just like to mention that if you have a question for Lisa, please place this as usual in the chat box. These can then be put to Lisa at the end of her presentation. Kirsty, as usual, is on hand too, and will be keeping an eye on things in the background. So if you have any technical problems, please message Kirsty, and also she'll be keeping an eye on the chat box as well. As you are aware, the webinar this evening is being recorded, so you can watch it at a later date as well if you want to. So now, without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to Lisa, who will start by giving us a little bit of background about ShoeMed. Thank you.
Hello and good evening, everybody. Yes, my name is Lisa. I lived in Australia for 21 years. When I came back in 2011, I founded ShoeMed. I'm very proud to still be involved with ShoeMed. It's a very specialist organisation. I'm hoping that most of you would have heard of ShoeMed at some point. We currently have one shop in Stratford-upon-Avon. That was my original one, and very much, particularly of course since lockdown, online. Now online fills a lot of people with dread because people with problem feet find it very, very difficult to shop online. However, we have made it a lot easier. So I guess this evening is all about helping you to start those conversations if you're not already having those conversations with your patients. And I think by the fact you're here means you're interested, you're perhaps touching on footwear, maybe getting a bit frustrated, or trying to open up the conversation a lot more by gaining some more knowledge. And that's my job. So I hope that this evening will give you more confidence to refer more for footwear. Whilst I touch on the word referral, a written referral is absolutely gold. I had one yesterday and the woman rang me today, which was wonderful. So we don't mind how you send us a referral. It can be by email, it can be on WhatsApp to me, it can be by carrier pigeon, it doesn't matter. As long as it gets to us, it can be really useful. So again, hopefully the things that you learn tonight will help you to write some referrals to us. Now, first of all, what I think is a really great way to start is when you have your patients, and the way that I was taught when I learned podorthics in Australia. I was very, very fortunate. I worked alongside some wonderful podiatrists, wound care specialists, and my boss was a wonderful teacher. He helped found podorthics in Australia many years ago. And one of the first things he said to me is, Lisa, when you have somebody in front of you, look at their current shoes. And he said, I don't mean just look at their shoes, pick up their shoes and have a really good inspection. And I think this is the first step. So you have somebody there in front of you, you've taken their shoes off, they've come to see you, obviously they have some problems you are assisting them with. The first thing to start with is turn the soles over, have a look underneath, have a look at the wear pattern. You can cheat, you can have a look at their size as well, as another handy tip that I got. If incidentally you do have a shoe where the size is actually printed on the outside, that's a really good start. That is quite a nice quality shoe. Many shoe manufacturers, when they make the mold that they pour the sole into, if they do want to cheat a little, so say you've got a size 5 and a 5.5, they will sometimes use the same size sole, so they won't actually print the size on the bottom. Now, that's not true of everybody, but for some manufacturers that is the case. But you are inspecting the soles of their shoes to look for a wear pattern. So I guess, you know, what you're looking for is the natural wear pattern, which is slightly to the outside where their heels strike, go forward, as we all know, into the gate where they push off. By looking at the soles of their current shoes, you'll be able to see some abnormal wear. You may even get a hint they perhaps have a leg length discrepancy. Obviously, if they've got excessive pronation or supination, the sole will show you that. And your patient will be very impressed that you can pick up on these things just by looking at the soles of their shoes. You can also, of course, inspect to see if they've got anything stuck in the bottom of them. If somebody, you can tell if they live by the beach. You can have great fun with this, by the way, because you can see sand, etc. And it will give you a good insight into how they're using their shoes. if they are in fact wearing the shoes they've come to see you with more often or not, or if they've got very little signs of wear, they're obviously not wearing them that often and they're going home and putting their different shoes on. So inspect the outsole to start with. You'll find that outsoles, and I've decided to go through this evening with the different componentries, the different materials and how they're going to affect fit by going through the whole inspection. So the outsole of your shoe, this is a Joya shoe. So this is one with a rocker sole, as you can see. Joya use wonderful technologies. They've got different, as you can see, different layers in the soles of their shoes. And primarily it's a form of polyurethane for cushioning and for bounce. So PU, as it's commonly called, or polyurethane, you'll find used in a lot of quality comfort footwear. And I should say that my background is very much in medical grade therapeutic footwear. So everything I talk to you about will be for comfort footwear and the materials that are used. You'll find it in DB shoes. So this is a DB shoe. This is a polyurethane. With the traditional DB shoes, got lots of props here, by the way. This one is injection molded. So this particular sole is injection molded, which means it's a hot liquid that's injected up onto the upper of the shoe. So it's full of millions of air bubbles. You'll find this used in hotter as well. Most of the time they're going to use a polyurethane sole. So it's used a lot. It's very resilient. It's solid, which is also important. So when you look at other soles, for example, that are glued on, where they have the hollow, lighter. So you'll find that they use less material as well, of course, but it's lighter as well and more flexible. However, a solid polyurethane unit, if you have a patient in front of you who needs this done, who needs a full sole raise added, you can see that's been split. Now that's important. So when you're inspecting their shoes, what you want is something that's solid. If you're looking to have it modified, a flare, a raise, a wedge externally, anything like that, what you won't want, and what your shoe modifier won't want to, I've got my chap that I use here locally, who's wonderful, is anything like this, because I cut through it and there's nothing in the middle to actually adhere the material onto. So that's your outsole. Now you'll find, back when I started in the day, the footwear I worked with was an American company called PW Minor and Son. They used a lot of sheet form of EVA, which is ethyl vinyl acetate. And I'm going through the most commonly used materials in comfort footwear. But EVA, and you'll find it used a lot in orthosis, of course, is very lightweight. It comes in different densities. It's very easy to modify, which is why it was used traditionally in a lot of medical therapeutic footwear. This particular shoe, this is a YDO shoe. This is an excellent shoe. We use a lot of these. This is an EVA material here, which has got a little bit of a coating on the outside. Very easy to cut through, to be modified, but doesn't wear as well. So if you've got a patient who's quite a heavy person and you can pick up that they've got perhaps EVA soled shoes, they probably will wear through those very quickly. Now they can be repaired, which is great, but they may want to consider changing to the polyurethane for greater longevity of wear. And whilst I touch on wear and whilst you're inspecting wear with your patients, remember when I mentioned that perhaps they're excessive pronator or supinator, when they're going out and they're taking your advice to buy a better quality, probably more expensive shoe, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to last longer. So you will get the statement, oh, I'm paying, you know, £100 for a pair of shoes, but it will last me 10 times longer. It may not, but it will be able to be repaired because it's quality and it will protect their joints. And again, that's what's really important. You can have a shoe with a PVC, so a really tough, hard-wearing sole. It's used a lot in cheaper footwear because it's cheaper to produce, and PVC is slightly heavier. It is more resilient, but their joints are going to wear out more excessively because it's not going to cushion like lots of these beautiful, lovely, soft rolling soled shoes are going to cushion their joints and protect them from excessive wear. So I think that's important. I always use analogies. It is like tires on a car. You'll get better quality, you'll get better grip, you'll get better stopping, but in the end, tires will soon wear out, and it's the same with soles on shoes. Going back to sole units as well, you've probably all had a patient that's purchased a pair of shoes, perhaps on a sale. So they bought 3 pairs at once. They stuck 2 pair under the bed, worn 1 pair, gone to pick them up, and if they're a polyurethane, they all start to sort of disintegrate. Have you ever seen that, where the bits, it feels like all the bits are coming out and they're disintegrating? They are designed nowadays, and the rules, particularly in Germany, are exceedingly strict on materials being able to decompose when they're buried in the landfill. So if you imagine that this particular shoe is put in the dark, it's put in the slightly damp, it's not moving, it will deteriorate. And when I worked in Sydney, we actually had a huge problem in our warehouse because it was incredibly humid. It's on the northern beaches, wasn't air conditioned, really humid. And that combination of the constant moisture in some of the soles of very expensive shoes from Germany led to the deterioration very rapidly. So we had to bring in more deliveries, which probably isn't environmentally friendly as well, until we got air conditioning, because we just couldn't store them. And it was the same with people putting them under the bed. So please tell your patients to wear their shoes, because actually if they're moving, they don't deteriorate as much. It's when they're kept still, simulating going in the landfill, which goes back to PVC. When this stuff's buried in the landfill, it doesn't break down as readily at all. So it's not as friendly. Yeah, so that's your soles on your shoes. So your patient's been to see you, you've had a quick look. It doesn't take a long time, quick inspection underneath. Oh, you've got signs of excessive wear. Right, okay, might check your leg length, because there's one wear pattern slightly different at one shoe to the other. Great. The next thing you're going to do, please, is inspect inside. And it literally does mean putting your fingers right in and feeling to the end. Now, remember I said you may be able to see the size inside their shoes. It's generally printed on the inside, on the tongue, somewhere like that, or on the base of the sole. When you put your hands inside, feel right to the end. Have you got a little hole? Most people have. They've got a tiny little hole in the end or on the top. The shoes are too short. The other way to tell if they've got a removable insole is pull it out. And particularly if they've got an animal, a cat, nice furry cats, very handy, dogs, you'll be able to see a little mark where their toes are coming to. And at the end, now what you actually want to see at the end is about 10 mil of cat hair or fluff, because it means their toes aren't getting to the end, which is great. But if you see basically they're disturbed all the way down to the end of the insole, then their shoes are too short. And it's very common if people haven't been measured for a while, fitted for a while, their shoes are going to be too short. You're going to have a good feel inside, and you're going to feel the seams. So of course this shoe here, DB shoe, it's got some stretch, but it has got a little seam across there. You want to feel again, you might be able to match up the seam, of course, to a corn on their toe, and you can advise them they need to get something with a deeper toe box it doesn't touch, or something without a seam in that area. And also feel around and actually feel if the shoe's lined, and what sort of lining does it have at the front. So is it a full synthetic lining? You'll be able to feel, I can feel this one. Obviously, it's got the man-made material on the top for stretch. It's going to be synthetic lined. Or is it, in fact, leather lined? Now, when you get these, here we go. When you get a shoe, if you look in the back here, in the back quarters, as you're inspecting their shoes, you may see that it's leather. Now, normally this little piece at the back here will be a goat skin, or it will be a suede for more grip. But even if it's leather lined here around the back quarters of the shoe, when you put your hand inside, it may not be leather lined all the way. It may be synthetic lined. Now that's fine, but if your patient's perhaps talking about having excessive perspiration, maybe having some allergies to some synthetic materials, it may be worth finding out what the lining of those shoes is, to see whether that could be having an adverse reaction or a positive reaction. Now we will see even more as we go along, a lot more of these stretch materials. This is like a 3D mesh or knit type upper with some stretch. This one is a stretch material here. I've actually got it in a sheet form to show you. So that's what it looks like in a sheet form. You can see the pretty pattern on the top, and it's used a lot. When it first came out, it was like a horrible wetsuit material, and it was really quite horrible to wear. They've improved vastly. And one of the big companies that uses a lot of stretch, and we're one of the first people to do it, is Extensible, which is a Dutch brand. And you can see they have a lot of fun with their styling, but everything around here is all a stretch leather. So it's a leather on the outside and stretch material on the inside, which is just wonderful. And I think I don't know what we did before it was invented, to be quite honest, in therapeutic footwear, because it's just been marvellous for having a shoe that looks nicer, because you can cheat a little bit. Now, I will add a word of warning. If I've got somebody that's got a hammer toe and has, of course, has had ulceration on that, even though it's stretched, it is still slight pressure. So, I would say we're always very cautious. Yes, it will be forgiving, but it is still a little bit of pressure. So we'd be a little bit cautious in that aspect. But the stretch on the uppers has been absolutely fantastic. So you're feeling around, you've inspected on the inside, you found out if your insole's loose or not. Some of them have two hiding, so this one's got two on the inside, which is wonderful. Pop it back in. You're feeling around, you felt for holes, you felt for any seams that could be causing problems. You're also going to look at the back of the shoes. So you'll find that, it's probably a good example actually. I put together, to show you different structures and how they affect the fitting, these three shoes are all a length 6, and in DB shoes, all within the same manufacturer, they're all a 6V fitting. Now 6V is like a new way of describing 6E, 8E fitting, so very deep, very wise, use a lot on edematous feet, edematous ankles. What you will see though, however, is because of the way that they're made, they fit very differently. So this one's got a square toe. Hope everybody can see that. This one's got a square toe. This one's got a round toe here. But one of the other things that's important, if you've got a patient that's complaining of a lot of heel movement, is that this one is actually quite large around the opening here in comparison to this one, which is actually quite small. Now, when shoes are made, and they're made on the last, got a last here, plastic last to show you. Traditionally, they were wooden, of course, and some, custom shoe makers are still using wooden lasts, or they're using nylon lasts like this, and they stick bits on them to modify the shape of the last so they can actually pull the upper over the shoe. But how that pattern is made with the heights that it goes onto the last very much affects the fit. So a common problem when you've got, and I'm sure you've seen it, patients that have very swollen feet, is sometimes the back of their foot, their heel, is actually quite normal and quite narrow. So then you need to get them into something that's got a much smaller opening here. And that's where this shoe is particularly good. And I actually love the shape of the square toe as well, but it is much smaller. Having said that, you'll have some patients where they may present with irritation or even ulceration around their malleoli, and in which case it's important they don't have a shoe, of course, that's too deep. So you will be looking at the back of the shoes here to see how high it is. Also have a feel around the top line. Now, most sports shoes, of course, have all this sort of lovely soft padding around here, but you will find some footwear is a little bit firmer around the top. So again, you can advise, look, I think the top line of your shoe is actually quite hard. It might be contributing to that, that skin irritation that you have around your ankle there. So let's perhaps look at changing you into something that's got a little bit more padding. Worst case scenario, if you've got somebody that loves their current shoes, but they're causing that problem, you can, my guy can do it. He can unpick this top line and just roll it down a little. So just roll it down so it just gets away from that sensitive area. So if that is a problem for you, then and they've got a shoe that they love, or arguably hasn't worn that much, or is quite an expensive shoe, it may be able to be altered for them. Yeah. So one of the things to remember, and I haven't actually got a Gore-Tex lined shoe here, but with winter coming on, there's a lot of promotion of Gore-Tex or various forms of Tex. So Gore-Tex is a brand name. So if you see Gore-Tex written, it's normally got a little R for being a registered sort of trademark, a brand name. But other companies will have their own versions. So they might call it, Joya-Tex or different forms of Tex. A Gore-Tex lining is essentially like a whole sack that goes right the way around the inside of the shoe, so that it has that water resistant lining. I will use the words water resistant because there's nothing that's completely waterproof apart from a Wellington boot. They are everything that's water resistant or waterproof. Doesn't mean that it's it's necessarily going to keep you completely dry. And the reason I say that is because people buy a water or a Gore-Tex lined shoe, go out every morning walking the dog, get it absolutely saturated, don't let it dry out properly, and eventually the water will still find its way in. Water always finds a way in. So just still be cautious. Generally, a water resistant shoe will have a bellows tongue, which means the tongue is sort of stitched up to here, so that you can get into water, but you must dry them out. But a Gore-Tex lining, as I was explaining, is like a little sack, a little bag that goes all the way around the lining of the shoe. It does make it a tad smaller. So please urge your patients, if they're looking at buying a Gore-Tex line shoe, get them to double check the fitting, because quite often that whole sort of bag effect pulls it in a little bit tighter. So they may wish to go half a size longer. And we all know that sizing in footwear is a bit like sizing in clothing. You know, I can go into Marks and Spencer's, size 12, jeans, pull them on, no problem. If I go into Levi's or somewhere like that, size 12, can't even get them over my knees. So it's the same with shoes. The shoe manufacturer is the one who determines what their sizing is. Now, there is a standard for increments in size across the footwear world, but there is no rule that says every size 6 has to be the same, and they're not. Even within brands, as I just showed you with these DBs, they all fit slightly differently. One was made in the factory in Northampton traditionally, this one here. This one's always been made in Portugal, I believe. So they supply their lasts, but they all fit subtly differently. So even within a brand, and keeping up with brands is it's difficult. You cannot be expected to know every brand. What I'm trying to convey to you is that you can be expected to know what to look for in the signs of how shoes are made and how materials are used to help your patient. But I'm even having to upskill on Joya, for example. They've just released a whole new catalogue with different models in there. And I noticed that the Wave technology, which is this one here, which is a very stable rocker, is slightly different. The sensors, this bit in the middle here, the stability portion of this shoe, the material's changed slightly. It's changed for the better. So it's changed to a slightly denser material for wear, but shoe manufacturers will change things all the time. And as you know, you'll have a great pair of shoes. You go to buy another pair and it's changed slightly. But that's what they like to do to, I think, try and keep everything up to date more than anything. Right, so we've gone outsole, wear, we've gone insole, have a look, see for hair on the end, see perhaps if their shoes are too short. You've had a feel around. Obviously, you're having a really good feel around if they have diabetes, because I found all sorts of things inside shoes over the years. I remember being in the Royal Adelaide Hospital when I was doing some training with the podiatry department there. They had a patient that was coming back continually with ulceration on the end of his toes. Eventually turned out, they found out where he'd lost his keys and they were in the end of his shoes. So you will have to get your hand inside and have a good feel. I've had bits of sandwiches. I did say to a man once, "Oh, chicken sandwich for lunch." Yes, because it was inside the shoe. But it is a good thing to do, because it will, again, easily open up that conversation. And you've checked that you've made sure that nothing they're wearing inside of that shoe is going to cause them any harm. So yes, definitely checking on the inside, particularly if they've got diabetes, for any tacks. Tacks in the manufacturing, bits of glue that could be on the upper. You know, what I didn't really mention there is when a manufacturer uses lots of seams on their shoes, okay, it can be decorative, but at some point they may use some glue in that process. You need to make sure there's no hard bits of glue on the inside. But quite often what they're doing is they're using smaller pieces of leather, because when you have a large piece of leather, which is, let's face it, it's the byproduct of the meat industry. There's more and more footwear that's vegan nowadays, which is man-made leather. But a cow itself will encounter perhaps barbed wire, ticks, bites from, and so it's very unusual to get a whole piece of unblemished leather. So they'll cut smaller pieces out and stitch them together so they get good value out of the hide, which is fair enough. But the other thing that they'll do, and you see a lot of this nowadays with these lovely embossed leathers, as you can see, with all the beautiful textures on them, that is a piece of suede. So when you get the top piece of leather, you know, the really lovely polished, or the nubuck. And nubuck is different to suede. So this is a nubuck shoe from Joya, which is the top piece of leather, or the second split down, which has just been brushed. So it's nice and soft. And also, if your patients do ask you why they use a lot of nubucks in comfort or extra wide, extra deep footwear, it's because it's not as reflective. You can imagine, and quite often you'll see it with an NHS shoe, where you've got a much bigger shoe than this, which is black leather and it's shiny. It's really reflective, and it makes the shoe look bulkier and look bigger. When you use a softer brushed leather, it's not only softer on the toes, but to the eye, it's not as glary. It does actually look softer. But going back to using then suede, so when you've got a piece of skin from a beast for footwear manufacturing, you go various splits down to get as much as you can, you'll get to the suede. Suede is often very marked, so they emboss it. So they cover it with various forms of plastics, basically, to cover up any of the imperfections, and then you have something that can actually be used, which is getting better value from the leather. When you actually go to a shoe factory, which I've been to many over the years, many that are spit and sawdust type shoe factories, and you think, oh my goodness, and then really slick ones like Fin Comfort in Germany, amazing shoe factory. When you look at what goes into making a shoe, it does make you think, wow, I know shoes can be quite expensive, but I'm amazed they can be produced for how they're produced. It really is quite incredible what goes into them. When you're also getting to your final 5-minute inspection, feel around the ends of the shoes here. So you can feel this is quite firm. Now, the reason this is firm is because it's got a toe puff in the end. That is a toe puff. So it's a piece of thermoplastic material. And the reason it's put into particularly a comfort, extra deep, extra wide shoe is to keep the toe up. So if you imagine without that toe puff in, that shoe would just collapse. It would collapse in on the toes and cause damage. So they use a thermoplastic toe puff, and that's how before it's formed. And this upper here, which I've got to show you, that's with the heel counter molded, which I'll go through that in a minute. It's the same process, but that's before the toe puff's actually been heated over the last and pulled into shape. And when it's pulled into shape, it is heated. It's then cooled down to set, and the same is done at the back with the heel counter here. Now, with some forms of footwear, they may not even have a toe puff, which could explain why your patients got problems if the end of the toe is just collapsing down. The toe puff may have been damaged. So again, when I'm fitting shoes, I don't get my thumb, and like some people do in the shoe shop, and press it right down on the end to feel where your toe is, because I have actually seen a toe puff broken, damaged. So you do have to be quite careful with them. This is quite a solid, that's a big toe puff. So you'll see other ones that are quite fine, they're quite delicate and put more down fashion footwear. But when you've got, you know, a nice big shoe like this, it's got to have a decent toe puff in the end. So have a feel, make sure it hasn't been damaged. Get your patients not to put the shoes because it's thermoplastic. If they put it next to a radiator, it'll activate again and it could melt and cause damage. And the same with the heel counters. Now, particularly if you're prescribing an orthosis, you'll want a decent heel counter. Now, again, when I started back in the day, the American shoes used to have extra long medial heel counters, and they were rock solid, really solid. Around the outside, they only ever went to laterally to about there, but on the medial side, they were really strong. This has got a decent heel counter. So grab the shoes that your patient's wearing and have a feel. A, has it even got a heel counter? B, is it a very flimsy one made of card rather than thermoplastic? So it should be a thermoplastic heel counter. A little handy tip, if they're finding that the shoes are too tight at the back with the heel counters, because it's thermoplastic, you can very carefully, and everything I speak is from experience because I've been there, done that, and I've burnt shoes. Get a heat gun and very carefully move it around, heat up that heel counter, and you might just be able to push it out a little bit. Just ease it out to give them a little bit of room. If they've got perhaps a bit of edema on one foot and you just want a little bit of easing. But naturally with wear, when they come off the last, well, this is a good way to show you actually. So that shoe last there, when this shoe comes off, of course, around the heel, we all lovely and neat and formed. And when you start to wear the shoe, you think, well, it's a wee bit tighter. I can feel a little bit of movement. That's okay, because if it's thermoplastic, it's going to, with the heat of the body, just heat up gently and mold to the shape of their heel. So, you know, that will ease in. And of course, if a shoe's been tried on in the shop a few times, it will have gradually eased out. But you do want to protect that. If you've got a decent heel counter with a nice heel clip, as it's called, to, you know, nip in around the base of the Achilles area, get them to use a shoehorn. I can always tell this shoe is a dead giveaway if people don't use a shoehorn. You see how padded this is? This is YDA. This is a great shoe. We sell loads of these. It's actually got a spring base plate in the bottom. So as you walk, it literally puts a spring in your step. Great for osteoarthritis. But it was actually developed in Italy for diabetes. So they wanted to produce something that looks nicer. So what they've done is they've padded everything. So everything, including the back here, is so padded. I don't know if you can see that. But see this bit here? So that bit goes in if you're not careful. This heel counter is rock solid. So that, but the heel counter, I can tell when somebody's not been using shoes, because they'll come back in the shop and they're all folded down, like kids do with their shoes, their school shoes. We all know that. So yes, if customers, please always use a shoehorn, because otherwise they will damage the shoes. And that's not the fault of the shoe. That's the fault of the wearer not using a shoehorn. If you're struggling, if you've done your inspection and you've noticed that there are signs of quite excessive, perhaps force entry getting into the shoes, if they're having problems, perhaps they've got osteoarthritis now in their feet, or they've got mobility problems with their hands, they can consider getting something that's got a longer lacing. So you see how this shoe has got really lovely long lacing all the way down here. So that opens up more. So that takes the stress out of it. They can actually open the shoe up more easily. You can say to them, look, you might want to consider changing the design of your shoe into something that just opens up a lot. You've got a lovely big opening. You can slide the foot into and then pull the laces up gently. Of course, if they're struggling with their laces and they really getting to the stage where they've got to consider straps, then you've got shoes with straps. I know that not everybody likes the look of them, but they can be exceedingly functional. I change a lot of shoes. If, you know, they've got a good pair of YDA or Joyas that they love, but they're struggling, then I can just get them converted to straps. So, you know, if they've got a good shoe, it'd be worth the £40 or whatever it is to actually get them converted to straps for them. So that can often help. And not all shoe styles come in straps. You know, you'll have a great range of shoes and they've all got, you know, these gorgeous laces and a little zip, but they don't offer that in a strap fastening. So it's not often, it's not often a choice for them, unfortunately. Right. All these things I'm whizzing through, by the way, if anything is of particular interest, I'm giving you a really good overview, hopefully, then we can go back on another session and concentrate on it. So you may say, for example, I want to know more about the different forms of leather that are used in footwear production, why they're used, and some of the synthetic stretch materials or 3D knit technologies. So we can do that. So please forgive me if I'm whizzing through, but I just wanted to give you that 5-minute inspection that will start the conversation for you. Finally, then, on that aspect, when you're thinking about more stability, so, you know, part of your inspection may have shown that, and I'm sure if they come to see you, that they need more support and stability. One of the other things that shoe manufacturers do to be naughty sometimes, when it comes from a fitting and certainly a support perspective, it does affect the fit and the support they're getting. This is a good example. So this was the original DB polyurethane injection molded sole unit. It's still around. So this is a current DB house shoe. Can you see at the back? It's lovely and square here. Nice and square and wide, nice and stable, solid, cut through it. That's great. What DB decided to do is to update the outsole unit. Very expensive. When you update a mold, you've got to do a new pattern. You've got to invest, you know, thousands and thousands of pounds to do this. But manufacturers do, because they want their customers to feel more modern and updated. So they changed it to this one, which hopefully you can see in the light there. But can you also see how it's rounded? So see here, You'll see this a lot lately on other brands. They rounded the corners. I didn't notice until I started fitting them, and I thought, oh, so what's happened now is you've got somebody that's fairly older person, who often are, that wear DB, they're an excessive pronator. Once they go into a sole like this, they keep rolling because there's nothing now to stop them. So this particular one is still around and it's still on some of the shoes, but just be aware, if you're making an orthotic device for your patient and you want to control that excessive pronation or supination, just check the soles of their shoes, because if they've got something that's rounded like this, you're going to have to get them to buy something else, because it just doesn't give them that stability at the rear foot that you would be looking for, I'm sure. And you'll see the wear as well, because you'll see, I saw it the other day on a lady where you could just see it was scuffing up the sides on the outside of the sole. So she just was continuing to roll. And it could be a falls risk as well. You know, part of working with a lot of elderly people is if you're seeing somebody that's a falls risk, that's something to look for as well, because there's nothing to stop that happening. I did take one the other day to my guy and get him to square it off a bit and just put a top piece on, just to give it a little bit more stability. But you will see it on a lot of shoes. What you're looking for in that case is shoes that are as wide as possible. So things like this with that sort of almost flared heel at the back there. You're looking for that stability. You'll find it even on Joya. Joya are soft and rolling and cushioning, but they quite often have this wider base at the heel. And that's what I mean, even within a brand, we'll have so many different models. So don't think because, you know, Joya offer these are actually mine, I love them, which is at the, you know, the curve technology, which is a true rocker. That's not reflective of the whole range. If you've got somebody that's got balance issues or needs that more stability, they just go to a different model. So within each range, there'll be different models. So yes, if your patient has a sole that you're a little bit worried about, it's a bit rounded, they may have a shoe from the same brand at home that has that more stability, which will support your prescription a lot better as well. Or it might be able to be altered as well. Right. And I think that's around about it from me. I've covered most things, hopefully. One of the things I didn't talk about were shanks in shoes, but largely what you see now with all of these shoes which are constructed on the wedge type soles, the traditional metal shanks, we all remember these, the metal pieces that were added into shoes, were really when you had a separate heel, so a lady's heel, and a separate sole. You won't see it as much now. So you don't get that problem of these things coming loose, which I don't know if anybody's ever had a shoe that's happened to, but quite often these little things used to work their way loose and you get this annoying squeak in your shoes. A squeak in a shoe nowadays, in a shoe such as this, can be when somebody has an orthosis that is perhaps has some plastic base on it, and it's just squeaking against the linings of the shoes if they're leather. So get a bit of talcum powder, pop a little bit in, shake it around, and it should stop the squeak happening. But you generally find that most shanks that are in shoes, if they are more of a nylon board like this, and when you have a shoe which has multi-layered soles such as Joya, you don't have the need for the shank, because that whole thing is actually making the shoe lovely and stable, and there's very little, you know, torsion or twist in it at all. Rocker soles are a whole other area. Rocker soles have been used in podorthics for many years, but of course commercially they hit the scene about 30 years ago, and they seem to have made quite a resurgence again lately. And I can certainly give you some detail in another session on the various forms of rocker soles, the good, the bad, the ugly, the stable, the unstable. And this big one in the background is an example of that. You've actually got a rocker, but of course you have the balance point in the middle as well. So it does have some stability. So, but we can cover that another time. So I'm happy to answer any questions now, if there are any from anybody. Thank you.
Oh, hi, Lisa. Thanks so much for doing this for us tonight. Really good question, actually, from Brenda, and I am so guilty of this. Brenda would like, first off, Brenda says, great information from Lisa. Be interesting to know what she thinks of Sketcher, which so many patients love.
Ah, yes. Okay. So if you had asked me a year ago, I would have said, if you have biomechanical issues, never touch Skechers, because they are super lightweight. They're obviously use a lot of EVA materials. and the original models, I think, cause more harm than good. And I had a pair of Skechers for a while, and I threw them away because I thought, wow, I only wore them for, you know, three or 4 months, and that the soles deteriorated so rapidly. Having said that, having popped into the Skechers store about 3 months ago, they've got some models which do have much thicker soles now. They appear to be more supportive. So I think they've got their place. And if you were saying to me, well, should a female be wearing a court shoe or wearing one of these new models in Skechers, I would say go for it. And it's a good opening for them to be, I guess, exploring wearing a more sporty type of shoe. But they certainly, I think they have improved. They have definitely improved. But you need to be very careful, because if you just say Skechers, they'll go out and buy the cheapest model, which is that original one, which is super twisty and just doesn't give them any support. And it's the same, I feel personally, with fit flops. Fit flops have that, you know, the best one is the original wobble board one, but even that will deteriorate. And when I went to the Skechers offices in London about 3 years ago, oh my God, I felt so old. I walked in, everybody was just gorgeous, and they're all wearing Skechers, and they're all, you know, and they were honestly gorgeous, very young, very progressive company. But they did admit that they aren't meant to last more than one really good season. So ladies, if you have fit flops, all you've got to do is turn them on the medial side, and if they've got those creases going on, and you watch ladies wearing them, they walk along the street, they feel lovely, and but if you watch, they are overpronated in them sometimes. So yeah, so Skechers, jury's out, make sure you buy the right model.
Staying on the sporty line then, Lisa, question from Bev. We often encourage patients to wear trainers for support, cushioning and rockers. This year I've seen a lot of trainers with fly foam. So what are your thoughts on these?
Fly foam, I might need more information on that. I can't profess to be a sports shoe expert, but is it some form of EVA in the outsole? Is that what they mean by fly foam?
Bev, are you there? Can you give us a bit more?
The trainers, for example, Hoka, I think they're very, very good. They need more width and they need more depth, because the only time people can't wear them. But certainly if you've got somebody with osteoarthritic problems, or you're looking for them to have more cushioning, Hoka are a great shoe. I've worn New Balance myself, cross trainers. I think they're great. Again, it comes down to also what fits, because you can have the best product in the world, but if it doesn't fit correctly, it's of no use at all. I think the question is, I'll find out actually about the fly foam. It could be that it's just a really soft fly foam, really soft material that's been added to the outsole, which would have some benefits for cushioning, but maybe not longevity of wear. I'll find out. I'll do some research.
Lovely. Another one for you, Lisa, from Karen. She said, what is the best time of day to try and buy new shoes?
Definitely in the afternoon, if you suffer from any edema at all. Makes no difference to me. I know I've got a Morton's neuroma on my right foot. My third toe's longer because I'm special. I don't get edema. I can buy my shoes at any time of the day. But definitely if somebody has any form of edema after lunch, or when they've been walking around a lot, because their feet will be slightly swollen, better to buy them. If they're a little bit loose the next day, just get a piece of Poron, make a 4-foot liner just to take up any extra room, but always better to have a little bit more room than not.
Lisa, this might be a bit where you can explain a little bit more about ShoeMed and what ShoeMed do. Ellie asks, is there an email that we can send any questions before referral is made if we believe our patient needs as their shoes modified, but not sure if a strap or lace is needed, as an example?
Yeah, by all means. Yeah, just send it to me, referral@shoemed.co.uk, and I will definitely help. That's my role. So my role is now to provide free Zoom calls on behalf of ShoeMed to patients. Doesn't matter where they are in the country, in the world. So a free Zoom call, and then I can send them links to the correct shoes that I feel they should buy. I will need to see their feet on camera. So I need somebody that's savvy with their camera, or got somebody else in the house that can point the camera down, because I've looked up lots of noses and up people's skirts. You know, I do need to see their feet. And the reason for that is obviously to have a look at any problems that they've got, any orthoses they have, to see those. And I do like to see a little lineup of their current shoes, because then I can ask questions about well, which ones can you wear and they're more comfortable? For example, it'll often be, well, my Scarpa hiking boot or my North Face hiking boot is the most comfortable, and it turns out that's because it's stiffer. So they need a shoe to wear that's not a hiking boot, that's a little bit stiffer. So yeah, definitely send it to me, and I will help wherever I can as soon as possible.
Lisa, we're going to go back to the question on rockers, this time from Bev Wright, our Bev. Rockers do tend to create more energy through the calf muscles, great for toning the bottom, but can put more pressure on the shins. Don't they tend to be heavy on the feet and can cause structural issues to the foot and ankles?
Yeah, I think it's a very fair question, and that's where your biomechanical assessment is crucial. So, you know, I wouldn't put somebody into this one that I wear, perhaps if they've got an Achilles problem, because arguably you could be overstretching the calf muscle and that area, and then overactivating other muscles and tendons and ligaments. However, if you require that rocker, for example, because they have, well, a bit like me, a mortise neuroma, so I don't like to spend any time on my forefoot, I like to roll through quickly, then you need more of a forefoot rocker. So I can actually wear that one when I'm standing at my desk without my orthosis, and I don't get any issues. And I think it is because I'm balancing here through the midfoot. Now, if I walk in this, and I live where there's a hill, oh yeah, I know about it. I do use more energy, definitely walking in this. I like that because I'm very fit, so it doesn't bother me. But yes, you would need to be very careful. But this is where you've got other shoes that, you know, this company calls theirs a rocker. Now, from the outside, I probably wouldn't normally call that a rocker. To me, visually, a rocker sole is where you've got that rounded look. But the concept of this is, I suppose, because it's stiffer and it's got the curved spring plate on the inside to spring you off. But if you look at other shoes that have rockers, I mean, that's a very stable rocker. So that's the Joya Wave technology. And that hasn't got the excessively low heel. So you haven't got that overstretching. It's just got a soft rolling motion. Remember, a rocker is simply removing peak pressures. So all it's doing is rolling the wearer through very gently, taking pressure off the peak pressures off the areas where you don't want it. That may be at the heel. So if they've got an ankle fusion, you may want a different sort of rocker. I don't have a Fin Comfort shoe here, but Fin Comfort have a really stable rocker. It's just one solid piece of polyurethane and just had huge success with ankle arthritis. But again, in podorthics, rockers have been used for years and they've been added on as modifications. So I've got a lady at the moment, I take that shoe and all she wants is a forefoot rocker. So we simply split it from here, add a little bit in, forefoot rocker, whoosh, rolled off at the toe, and she's got the forefoot rocker, but she's got all the stability at the back of the shoe. So it is a good question because there are so many different types of rockers. And I think that's where if you just say, oh, you need a rocker soled shoe, they may go out and buy an MBT. Now, again, I've sold MBT. We still sell MBT, but we've narrowed it down because some of the MBTs are so unstable. And I don't know if everybody can remember when MBT first came on the market. God, how was old as I? It must have been about 95. No, later than that, around 2000, I think. I remember working in Sydney, and that's when the MBTs were like, sort of like this, but so much more unstable. The heel sensors at the back here were made of EVA. So we mentioned EVA earlier on, very soft EVA. It deteriorated so rapidly. It was incredibly unstable. So with every step you were twitching, you know, medially and laterally, trying to get your balance. And I remember sitting at traffic lights in Sydney, waiting to go to shoe shop in Artarmon where I was working. And this woman going across, because as is the law in Australia, everybody has to go out for coffee in the morning. That's it. A bit like roast dinner in England. You have to go, everybody goes out for coffee. She had the tray of coffees, bless her, going back to the office. And she was wobbling all over the road with these MBTs on. I thought, but they caused damage. They actually caused a lot of damage. The heel sensors, these really soft EVA sensors, just blew out. Not only that, they sucked in water. So if you walk through a deep puddle and with the next step, it splurted the water out the side. So they're still around. They basically had to reinvent the whole sole unit. They got bought out. They're still around. They're a fantastic product now because they're the only truly completely stiff rocker on the market, completely stiff. There's no flex in them at all. So again, that really osteoarthritic foot, if they've got the balance, the MVT are amazing now that they've been redesigned.
Fantastic. Lisa, 2 more questions and then we'll finish up for today. And I'm pretty sure, if it's okay with you, that anybody who has any more remaining questions, they can just send that into your email.
Yeah, absolutely.
Lovely. One from Kim. Any advice for shoes for flat feet? Couldn't get my words out then. Flat feet. Any advice?
Yes. So for a truly flat foot, and this is one thing I didn't touch on, you really want something that's as wide through the base and through the midfoot as possible. And that is a good example. If you look at that sole, you see how it's completely through the sort of waist of the shoe, if you like, through this whole midfoot region, as wide as possible. Because if you've got shoes that go in, all of my shoes are sensible, so none of them really go in. Oh, that goes in a little bit more. Oh, this is mine, sorry, you can see I've been wearing it. See, it's a bit narrower through here. So if you've got a truly flat foot, that whole upper and that whole sole of the shoe has got to meet up to give that support, because it doesn't matter how strong the heel counters are, if they're completely flat and they roll in, they'll just roll off the top of the shoe. So it's got to be as wide as possible. So again, it's that visual inspection. It's turning the shoe over and going, oh, actually, that's quite good. That's quite wide through here. Or you'll turn it over and it'll be like an S shape. That's going to give you no good whatsoever, because, even though the upper of the shoe may be strong, that's never going to be enough to hold a foot. It all comes down to the control if you're making an orthosis on the inside, and that orthosis being able to balance on the actual sole of the shoe. And that's, this is crucial, because you'll make the best device in the world, but as you know, if it doesn't go in the shoe, then it's not going to work. But this is where it's got to be a whole partnership, so that your patient understands how important it is that they change these as well as using the device. But I'm presuming that when you're saying a completely flat foot, it is a foot that you're going to offer some form of support and correction internally with as well. But again, it can be complex. I've had a lady the other day with extreme hypermobility, and her foot, as soon as she stood up, it just disappeared completely flat. So I was just trying to find a shoe that was wide enough. I went to a German shoe in the end. A lot of the thin comfort shoes have that lovely, really wide, almost straight base that when you turn them over, you can hardly tell left from right. And that's when you know it's a truly wide, straight lasted shoe.
Last question for you, Lisa. Patients have been advised to get Asics and Hoka shoes for plantar fasciitis, but have found more success with the walk-in boot. Is that due to the stiff heel counter?
It could be due more to the stiff sole. That's very interesting, because generally a walking boot, it's the actual outsole that's stiff. So if they've got other things going on, maybe other referred pain, I would have thought more from arthritis, because Hoka are good shoes. The danger with saying any one shoe is great for plantar fasciitis is, as you know, it can be a whole myriad of different causes. And is it truly plantar fasciitis as well? But for general heel pain, I would have thought that the Hoka and the Asics were quite good. But if it's a stiffer boot, I think there's more going on there myself personally, because generally the stiffer boots are what I see on a daily basis with various forms of arthritis.
We just had one comment coming from Adam. I would always advise arch supports inserts for plantar fasciitis and a trip to see a podiatrist. So
exactly. And a diagnosis. How many times? Honestly, it's quite scary. If you ever get the chance to sort of spend time in the ShoeMed shop in Stratford-upon-Avon, we may have a day we've got 5 or 6 people coming in that Google's told them that they've got plantar fasciitis. And I probably don't need to tell you this, but one of the things we say is, and have you had a diagnosis? And everything has well, you can try this, but you really need to get a proper diagnosis. They display the usual suspects for the symptoms, but yeah, people can throw a lot of money at different shoes and different inserts. And we've had a lot of success, don't get me wrong, with various forms of inserts, but it's all about the patient being informed. And I think that's all of our job more than anything, including in the shoe shop, is to inform them their choices out there to get a proper diagnosis. Or I would say a good shoe like this can do you no harm. It's going to cushion your joints. Whether it will cure your plantar fasciitis is very debatable. You need a proper diagnosis, and you might need different form of treatment with orthosis, or shockwave therapy, or whatever.
Lisa, thank you so much. Lots of comments coming in to thank you. Some comments saying they'd like more information in the future, but we do have an article from you in the Q1 journal in 2023.
Yes.
And it's a series of articles, and hopefully we'll do a few more webinars to follow the series of articles as they're released.
Yeah.
So,
and I said, if there's anything I've skimmed through but you think, oh no, I really want more information, then just let us know. Honestly, it's the first one, so yeah, we're happy. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so I've got lots of experience, lots of stories, and yeah, happy to share whatever knowledge I've got. Be lovely.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Lisa. Thank you everybody else for joining us tonight. Enjoy the rest of your evening, and the link for the video will be available shortly, and Lisa's article in the journal Podiatry Review Q1 2023.
Okay. Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.